So I was given the great task of coming here today and speaking in the theme of sci-fi. Now, I'm getting a little Star Trek sense in the room here. I'm not going to point you out. You know who you are. But for the purposes of a smooth story, I'd like a show of hands of who's heard of a little tale called Star Wars. Okay, that's good. I don't have too much hard work to do. So my name's Danusia Wypych, and I am the Sustainability Manager at Z Energy. And so my world revolves around corporate sustainability and changing New Zealand's future in terms of alternate energy. In fact, I am one of the few people in the world who can probably come to work and say the first thing I need to do every day is change what is possible. That's what's written in my contract. That's what I get paid to turn up and do. And so today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've learned in demand management for transport energy, what we know in New Zealand now and what journey we're on. And for me, the story of Star Wars, apart from being right in the sci-fi space, is a great tale because it touches on the key elements for a sci-fi story. It makes us explore what it is to be human. It takes us outside our current framework by wowing us with a plausible science and technology. But it's all based in a different time and place, when anything is possible. So when you're looking at Star Wars and you're thinking about a fuel company, you start thinking about who would I be in that story? What role would I take? And if we click on from there, I'm Han. Okay, I might have done some interesting things in the past. I prefer to consider myself a little misunderstood. You know, not a bad guy, but I've sorted my stuff out now. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I'm on the right side. But the thing about a story, it's not so much what you say about yourself, and if we move on, it's what other people say about you. So when you work in an industry that's responsible for 20% of the country's carbon footprint, when you work in an industry that contributes almost $1 billion worth of social impacts through air pollution, sometimes people don't see you the same way you see yourself. Sometimes you kind of look like the problem. In fact, we often talk about being at the heart of the problem. So at Z Energy, we're very realistic about what we do for a living. We provide New Zealand with almost a third of its transport energy. We're not a fringe player. We're not the guy who'd like to move New Zealand. We move this country, and we work with businesses and people to make that happen. So the question is, if you're at the heart of the problem, how are we going to get back to, see, being at the heart of the solution? And the thing we do first and foremost every day is know where we are and think about where we could be. So as we move through, it's time to look at what could the future be. So the future is going to be amazing. It is going to be incredible. And I'm confident about this because I've seen what we've already achieved, what we can do when we set our minds to it. And looking forward, there's a couple of key things I think you've got to reframe around the story. Not so much in the technology space, but in the people space. Now, when we used to talk about a future, we used to talk about a lot of sameness, everyone being the same. It was a story about right and wrong. You know, everybody drives, they should just do it right. Everybody should be sensible. You should walk your kids to school. You shouldn't drive them there. We talked about transport and what we use transport for like there was no differentiation. But, you know, you just have to go to a bar in Tatooine to see the world's a little different out there. And if we move on, the future is actually about diversity. Yep, we've got a lot of things in common. We have a lot of common needs and drivers. But there's a lot of diversity too. What a family experiences in Northland will be really, really different from an urban family in Auckland for travel. How much of their budget is dedicated to that? So I'm a technology worker. We've just run technology over transport and travel in my business for a month. And on Tuesday last week, I had technology over tummy bug, as my young child was vomiting through the night, and I had 3 meetings, one of which I was leading. I had to work out how I was going to tend to my loving, dear child, who was pretty much going to be passed out on the couch all day and medicated heavily with television, and deliver on my responsibilities. So I videoed into a meeting with my colleague back there, Jerry. I phoned on another one, and I had a hilarious time with my guy from Mini Tankers on another video conference. Are you there? Are you there? Of course I'm here. Why am I not there for you? I'm here. But I'm not a freezing worker. You know, I'm not a process worker. I'm not one of the people who has to be there every day, day in, day out. I'm not a teacher. There's lots of people who are going to need to be where they want to go. So thinking that technology and communication is going to change everything is only one element of it. And when I think about all that diversity and how we're going to meet that in our transport needs and flourish, I think about the team we have to put together. And this comment was touched on earlier in the ECA presentation. So if we move on, say, if I'm Han, who else do I need to take with me on this journey? Well, I'm going to need a Chewy. I'm going to need a second guy who's out there. And pretty realistically, that's probably my drivers out there in the world. I'm going to need a CP3O. I'm going to need some pretty smart technology. Under the bonnet, behind the wheel, communication information, and touching on the conversation that we just had with Jeanette, I might need some royalty. There may be a role for all of us in this journey. And so looking forward from here, it comes down to how do we take the science and technology that we have available and that we can create in the coming decades and apply it to reducing our transport demands, or at least, as we've done in electricity, focusing it on the things that matter. And then you get back to the really interesting part of the story, which is if you want to have this conversation, if you want to share this story, somebody has to be listening to you. Now, in electricity, I don't know, yell me out some numbers, people. How long have we been talking about demand-side management in electricity?
40 years.
40 years. Oh, I thought it might be a little less than that. 40 years? But 70 years? And what's the vibe out there like now? Do people talk to you about that now? They're kind of into it, they kind of get it? Okay, so it took less than 100 years. I'm going to share with you how people feel about fuel companies and how much they're really listening. We have something called a Net Promoter Score. That means if there's 100 of us, and it's not too far off 100 here, would somebody say, yeah, you should buy fuel from that guy. He'd be a great guy to buy fuel from. So it's called a Net Promoter Score. Who would recommend you as a business? Who trusts you? Who likes you? Who thinks you're all right? Negative 49 is the average number of people who would say that for our competitors. So if there was a barbecue of 100 people, 49 of them would slag off their fuel supplier. So say, oh, no, you don't want to buy from him. Rubbish, mate. I don't know who you're going to buy fuel from, but don't buy it from him. Now, Zed was in a pretty good position. Only 29 people would say that about us. So we were leading the pack. We were smashing it out of the park. Only about 30 people really didn't want to do business with us. Fantastic. So can you imagine turning up and saying, hey, I know you hate my guts, but how about a little fuel-wise economy? How about a little demand-side management? You're not getting invited. You never got invited to the barbecue. So what we started working on was something completely unrelated to technology, something completely unrelated to what the future might hold. We simply started having more conversations with our customers, finding out what matters to them, what they use their energy for, what's important to their business, how much of their bill it is, whether or not it matters, whether or not they save 1%. I can assure you, when you do 3,500 truck movements per day in peak season, 1% on your fuel bill is incredibly fascinating. If you run 3 vans and your business is being a courier and it's 80% of your costs, sometimes that doesn't feel as important as getting your tax done, making sure your drivers are safe, and those sorts of things. So we've been at work for over 6 months now, and we have managed to get an astounding +1. Now when we go to the barbecue, one person says they'd like to work with us and that we were a good company to work with. And that is our challenge. While electricity is in the phase where you're looking at how do you implement, what can you do, what's smart, what will get past all the king's men, what will be effective, we're just starting the conversation. And it's not just with businesses. Let's go to a little place I love called Facebook. Why not? So we have 196,000 Facebook friends, which is quite big for a company, let alone a company in New Zealand. These are not words I made up. I Facebook stalked these people. Don B, I didn't give you his full name, so you can't do that. He's into Jeeps and 4-wheel drives. He went to Carlisle College and he lives in Cambridge. Betty Y, or Nana Betty as she sometimes calls, is fly. You can't tell from her handwriting how old she is. You can't tell anything. She has locked down her Facebook site. All I can tell you is she lives in Auckland and she's a nana. So we put up a post inviting people to become more economic drivers in New Zealand. And we were thrilled to get this reaction. We were thrilled with Dom. We thought Dom was a champ. And the reason that we thought Dom was a champ was because the last time we put out a commentary on, hey, wouldn't it be cool if a fuel company saved you fuel, nobody said anything. This is Facebook. Cats walk across keyboards all over the world and say things on Facebook. When we put our CEO online for 2 hours, we have 200 comments and questions. When we raise the price of petrol, we have 200 comments. When we lower the price of petrol, we have 200 comments. It's not that people aren't talking to us, it's just when we talk about demand-side management and transport fuels, they're not listening. They're really not listening. So for us, the big challenge is how do you create that important conversation. So we move on. And that comes down to the relationship between men and women and machines. Because there's kind of a feeling that somebody else will sort this out. That, we'll come up with some new wizard great thing, and it will all be good. Now, at Z, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future and what it means in New Zealand. In fact, we've just been in a process internally called Strategy 2.0, where we looked at what do we see as being the key trends for New Zealand. What's going to shape our industry? What's going to change the way people move and the choices that they make? And we did spend an awfully long time talking about cars, as you'd expect. So if we zoom in there a little bit, we talked about cars and what's under the bonnet, what really matters. And what happens in New Zealand is that fleet efficiency is a pretty slow move. You're getting about 2%, an incremental gain on fleet efficiency each year. We buy a lot of second-hand cars in this market. We drive a lot of kilometres when we're outside of our cities, but our fleet is not changing dramatically. And if we move in closer, there's plenty of good work already done. Those are all the efficiency technologies that are available today. And you could put them under the hood of any car, well, you have to choose between diesel and petrol down the bottom there, and get those efficiencies today. So we don't need to invent new and crazy things to become more efficient with our driving. We can and do change our vehicles. We just don't change our fleet very quick in New Zealand. And then you come up to the wider conversation, see? Why does a petrol company spend a lot of time thinking about the internet? Now, I'm going to stick my hand up here and say when I was playing with Lego, I didn't see the internet coming. I built my spacemen spaceships, and then I built them space letterboxes. Hell, I didn't even see radio coming. So what we did when we looked at the internet is we started to look at proxies for changes in fuel use. And what we found is a strong proxy for change in demand internationally, and starting to see it in New Zealand, is the availability of broadband, playing to the earlier point. Yep. So what we discovered is that that's going to have a much, much bigger impact on fuel use in the future than GDP, than population, than fleet, than fuel efficiency in vehicles. How we connect, how we choose to move, whether or not we go to the shops, whether or not we go to work, will have a more profound impact on the fuel we consume in our cars than our cars. So, with all of that in mind, what do you do when you want to start building a future? What do you do when you want tomorrow to start today? So we're looking at our action, see? And apart from building the conversation, so at least we got some choice words from Dom, we're also looking at where do you begin. We're putting online tyre pressure tools, we're looking at having conversation with our customers, and the wee man up there in the middle is not Mike, our CEO, although he does own a Mini for fuel efficiency reasons. It's Mark, and he is our eco-driver trainer, and he has been training drivers around New Zealand to drive more efficiently. And then we're going to do something fun, because you remember, it is supposed to be fun. We're taking them out to a racetrack later on to do some follow-up work with them and look at efficiency and driving. We've got an eco-driving tool online where you can learn lessons about how to drive smoother and what really matters. And something that we did that was a lot of fun is we took a heavy truck simulator to a public exhibition, and we put through a number of our commercial customers who don't normally kind of go to that sustainability stuff, and they found it profoundly interesting, and got to drive a truck and look at efficiency tips on that. Now that's real drivers, real trucks, real benefits. But we also had that conversation with our public. My guys in S&D came up with a spreadsheet that tells you whether or not you should have your windows wound up or wound down. And there's nothing like Nick Heslop, who normally spends his time slating what's going through the refinery going, like, do you fang it around town? Do you? Do you? Oh, come on, you look like you race it a bit. Let's just say, yes, you do. And telling you that at the end of it, if you changed a couple of your behaviours, you could be $2,000 better off. And for a young couple who had just built a house, and she and he had very different answers to the questions, and I said, well, basically, he's costing you about $2,000 a year. You might want to have a chat about that when you get home. So making choices is about having the tools and the opportunity to consider the options. And moving right along. What's lost off the side there is a bit on time and place. I originally had some stuff off the map, but it's now literally off the map. And what I wanted to take you through is how we see the future. So my view on the future is that it's not intangible. My view on the future is that every future starts today. It just depends which one you're running into. So that's me and my little boy, who ironically 2 years ago was wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, so I'm so lucky I got this gig. And what I do is I work in an organisation where my job is to turn up and change what is possible. And an element of that is to work with colleagues like my friend back there, Jerry, who change what's possible for our retail drivers, and Dom and Hayley and a big group of people who've been working for the last year to look at how we can change what is possible for our commercial customers. Because we often get stuck with where we are and our transport systems. Does anybody guess what this might be? This is a place in New York that was a transport system. Has anyone heard of the High Line? The High Line was a freight train system through New York City. It was when they elevated the trains out of the streets to make it safer for everybody, and they ran for 50 years, and then they decommissioned it, and it was left to rot within the city. But what happened was that nature reclaimed it and turned it into this quite magical wildflower garden. And then when they started to talk about tearing it down, friends of the High Line came together and turned it into this amazing inner city park where you can walk through, where people propose to their fiancés, where they have lunch, where you meet friends, where you have markets. They took a transport structure and transformed it into the world that they wanted to live in. And so for me, when we get all bent out of shape about motorways and cars and all the rest of it, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the future I'm running to and how to make that happen, because I know we'll repurpose the rest of it. For me, the Eco story is very, very inspirational, and I have been at a talk where they talked about their use of public health workers, and I came back to it, I'm like, oh my God, we need to find our public nurse. And everyone's like, okay, that's a little bit weird even for you. What's this about a public nurse? And what I was saying is we need to find someone who speaks to people, someone who understands what's important to people, someone who's not scary or horrible or telling them they're wrong, someone who's there to help them with what's important to them. And I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought I'd close with a very good friend of mine. So we need to be able to listen to what's going on around us. We need to be able to create connection, and we need to be able to provide a way to see through time and space to a world where it is fun and efficient, and we are connected, doing the things we need and want to do, and we have, hopefully not after 70 years, demand-side management and transport. Thank you.